Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. Excuse me. This audio podcast is part of a Storm Robotics article. This audio podcast is part of a Raptor Storm. This audio podcast as part of a Platinum Edition, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production. In today's audio podcast, a look at sort of Crouzons treatment and prognosis. So ultimately, if Crouzons is diagnosed if diagnosed early, there is there is a high probability in around good prognosis, but it depends also depends upon the malformation and the severity and specifically around craniosynostosis. In the majority of Crouzon's surgical intervention has been used, and it is important to get to have this in place as soon as possible in sort of suspect and high risk sort of neonates and pediatrics and young people. The Crouzons and cranial synostosis cranial in amongst the literature is and has involved a multidisciplinary effort or approach, and patients usually or recipients usually have a normal lifespan. Usually have a normal sort of lifespan in amongst well in amongst the early diagnosed and well in around where well in around where procedures have been implemented, and they're on in amongst the literature and around craniosynostosis and Crouzons. Historically, there are no pharmacotherapies or of any advantage, and so at the same time, more research is still required for in around this particular aspect of Crouzons, and to highlight here also that again that Crouzons and craniosynostosis is a multidisciplinary effort. The teams that have been involved in craniosynostosis, in synostosis, has been evidenced as first and foremost, obviously, the parents, the child's parents, and the child is being diagnosed. The diagnosed neurosurgeons, pediatricians, radiologists, plastic surgeons, oromaxillofacial surgeons, craniofacial anesthetists, orthodontists, dentists, orthopedists, ophthalmologists, clinical geneticists, and sort of pathology teams, speech, physical, and occupational therapists, and also teams, psychosocial teams. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics article. This audio podcast as part of a Raptor Storm. This audio podcast as part of a Platinum Edition. And this audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production.